In this video we're going to see how to use Python to read from a text file. Now first of all we want to talk about how to think of a text file. We usually think of it as a two-dimensional thing like a piece of paper or a page in a book, but in reality it's being stored as one long string. And each line is terminated by a special character known as a new line character. In the context of a string literal, the new line character is written using a backslash character followed by an N, but it's really just a single character, a single byte in our file. So for example, if I have this three-line text file where the first line has some text, the second line is blank, and then the third line has some more text, that would actually be stored as this long string of characters. And you'll notice I have a new line at the end of the first line of text. Then because the second line is empty, I just have a new line for it. And finally I have a new line at the end of the very last line. In order to read from a text file, we have to start by opening a connection to it, and we do that using a function called open. The first input to open is the name of the file that we want to read from, and that's given as a string. And then the second input is the string R, which indicates that we want to read from the file as opposed to writing to it or something else. And what that open function gives me back is something known as a file handle. It's an object that I can use to perform operations on the file. And I'm storing that file handle in this case in a variable called f. So let's assume this is my text file and it has these three lines that we talked about earlier. And let's assume it's called reminder.txt. So I'm opening up a connection to it for reading. I'm taking the file handle and storing it in the variable f. And inside that file handle, inside that object, are a number of different methods that we can use to work with the file. So one of them is called readLine. It takes no inputs, so you can see we have empty parens, and it gives you back the next line in the file. The first time that you call it, you're going to get the first line, so you can see we're getting the first line of reminder.txt, this line up here, and notice how the new line is there in the context of that string. So readLine gives you up to and including the next new line character. If we call it a second time, we're going to get the second line. And because that second line has nothing on it but the new line, all we get back is a string containing a new line. If we call it again, we get the third line, again with a new line character at the end. Now at this point, if you call readLine again, because there's nothing left in the file, you're going to get an empty string. If for some reason you need to start over at the beginning, you can do that by opening up a new connection and getting a new file handle. And that new file handle will start over at the beginning of the file. Now another method that's available to us in each file handle is a method called read. It gives you back the entire file as one big string. Now often we want to process a text file one line at a time. In theory we could use a loop and just use readLine as part of that loop. Inside the body we would call readLine to get the next line. But the problem with that is we often don't know how many lines there actually are, and so we won't know how many repetitions we need to make with our loop. But Python allows us to get around this problem by giving us a special kind of for loop that works with the file handle. So we can just say for line in file handle, where we put whatever our file handle variable is right there. And we can use whatever variable we want here, but usually we're going to use the variable line. And then the body of the loop will be whatever we want to do with a given line. And this is going to read one line at a time from the file, assign it to the variable line, and then we'll be able to process it, and we're going to keep looping until there are no more lines left. So let's assume that what we have is a CSV file. CSV stands for comma separated values. This is a very common format for data files. Each line of the file corresponds to one record in our data. So in this case I'm assuming I have a CSV file called courses.txt, and you can see that each line is a record that gives me information about a single course. I have the department code, I have the number of the course, and I have when it meets. and those individual fields in a given record are separated by commas, hence the name CSV. So here's some code for processing courses.txt. We start by opening up a connection and getting a file handle. This time I'm using the variable file for my file handle. And what the rest of this code is going to do is go through the file line by line and count how many CS courses there are. It's also going to print out the name of any CS course that it encounters. So we start by initializing our counter to 0, and then we start our loop. And because we're giving the loop our file handle here, the first value that our loop variable is going to get is a string representing the first line of the file, including the new line. So it's as if we had done readline, but we don't actually have to call readline ourselves. It gets done for us. Now, the fact that that new line is there is often a problem. So typically, when you're reading from a file, the first thing you want to do inside the body of your loop is trim off that new line. And you can see I'm doing it using a slice that goes up to, but not including, that last character, which is the new line character. And so after doing that, and assigning the slice back to the variable line, line is now going to look like this, so it has the entire first line, but it no longer has the new line character at the end. We then use the split method inside the string to split on the commas, and that'll give us back a list that we're assigning to the variable fields, and each element of the list is one of the fields from that first line. And so this allows us to check to see if the first field is equal to CS. And if it is, that means that this is a CS course, so we're going to print the department code and the course number, and then we're going to increment our counter. And then we go back and we get the next line in the file. It still has the new line at the end, but we take care of that with a slice. We then split it to get the individual fields. We check if field 0 is equal to CS, but it's not in this case, and so we don't print anything, and the counter doesn't get incremented. We go back, we get the next line, which is the third line. The value of line still has the new line, so we do a slice to get rid of it. We split. We check if fields 0 is equal to CS. It is, so we print fields 0 followed by a space, followed by fields 1, which gives us this, and we increase the counter. And we're going to keep doing this, looping and processing one line at a time until there's nothing left in the file.